Let's look at this third example. It says the height of a projectile launched upwardly from the top of a 96-foot tall tower is given by this equation. Factor this. So when we get to factoring quadratics, that means where you have a variable raised to the second power and then a variable to the first power and no variable. This is a quadratic. It doesn't always have to have all three of these terms, but it does have to have a variable raised to the second power. I want this t squared to be positive. So the GCF of 16, 80, and 96 happens to be 16. Always try this number first and see if it goes into all three. And it does. So I'm going to pull out not just the 16 though, I'm going to pull out a negative 16 because I want the t squared to be positive. So I'm going to pull out the negative so I can switch the sign. So I'm going to go ahead and divide all three terms by negative 16. And basically that negative is going to change the signs, and when you get to factoring, it'll make factoring that t squared a little bit easier if it's a positive number. Okay, so when we factor, we have the negative 16 in front, and the first term is just t squared minus 5t minus 6, and that's it. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to solve for a variable. And so a lot of times when we have an equation, we actually want a specific variable that we want to solve for because we have all the other information and it'd be easier to have our equation solved that way. So we're going to write down the steps and practice solving. So we're going to solve the surface area formula for L. And so what you want to do, step 1, is to get terms with the variable solving for on one side of the equal sign. So you want those terms on one side and all the other terms on the other side. So what I do is I look at my equation. Let's underline the terms that have an L in it because that's what we want to solve for. So that's these two, which means I want to move this 2WH over to the other side. So I get these two underlined terms by themselves. So that means I would subtract 2WH from both sides of the equal sign. When you do that, the S and 2WH are not like terms, so you can't combine them. So I'm just going to write them right next to each other, equals, and then I'll write my other two terms, 2LW plus 2LH. Okay, so that's step 1. So the two terms with L are on one side and the other terms are on the other side. Once you've done that, it's now really easy to factor out the variable that you're trying to solve for. And so in this case, I'm solving for L. So I have an L in both of these terms, and I'm going to pull it out. So the left-hand side is not going to change. And on the right-hand side, I'm going to pull out that L, and I'm going to be left with, I'm going to divide both terms by L. So I'll write that. And when you do that, you get S minus 2WH equals L times 2W plus 2H. Okay. Once you've factored out this variable, you can now solve for that variable. So the way to solve is this operation right here is multiplication. So to get the L by itself, I would need to divide both sides by 2W plus 2H to get these here to cancel. So I'm going to divide both sides. Okay, and so what I get, I'm going to write the L first. L equals the S minus 2WH over the 2W plus 2H. So I've now solved for my variable, and this would work well when I had these three values and I just want to know what L was. It'd be much faster now to use this formula. Okay, so let's practice with example 2 and do the same thing. I'm solving for D, so I have S equals A plus ND minus D. So first thing, underline the terms that have a D in them. Once you've done that, I can see that I need to move this A over to the other side. So I'm going to subtract A from both sides of the equal sign. When I do that, I'm left with S minus A equals ND minus D. Okay, step 2 says factor out that variable. So I'm going to factor out the d on the right-hand side. So I'm going to have s minus a equals, pull out the d. It means I'm dividing. So nd divided by d minus d divided by d. Okay. So I get s minus a equals d. Here the d's cancel and you're just left with the n minus, be careful here, d divided by d is 1, so you should have a 1 there. And the last step is 3, solve for the variable. To get d by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by n minus 1. So what I get as an answer is d equals s minus a over n minus 1. That's supposed to be an n. And we've solved for our variable.